Welcome to Practical Talk Time. I'm Sandy Wrobel, your host, and today's February 28th, 2012, and we're doing a second show that will be shown later with Stephen Shepard, and he has done a marvelous thing. He's developed a WaterCar that he actually drove across country, and we're going to be speaking a little bit more about the actual driving from Connecticut to Oregon and back, and some of his adventures, what he actually did on the road, and some of the people that he met. Welcome again to the show, Stephen.
Thank you, Sandy.
Great to have you back. You had said that you had started out in Brookfield, Connecticut, on this trip, and so let's start out in Brookfield and see where we wind up. Okay.
Well, the trip started at Greenfest, which was an event that we held in New Haven at the Sound School. We had 23 bands come from 5 states and Armenia. Had a musician come from Armenia to play, and that was kind of our party to send off the car.
Right, and let's make it clear, you're talking about the country of Armenia, not
Correct.
Armenia, New York.
Not Armenia, New York. We're talking Middle East, but way over there.
Okay.
And his name was Peter Jam. We've been friends for a couple of years now because of that party. And it really gets into the human side of the story has been amazing. Just putting that event together and having 23 bands come up to play, as a benefit. Having Bank of America come in, they had a dozen people show up to help out with the event. So that was really, really nice, met a lot of great people, and then we jumped on the road, basically 2 days later. Within our first hour on the road, we stopped at ABC News in New Haven, and they did 7 live spots on us. They did, I'm sorry, not live, they did 4 live spots, and then they filmed 3 more for the 6 o'clock news. But most importantly, they gave us their affiliate list for the entire country.
Ooh.
And said, as you drive, simply pull into town and call the affiliates, and they will put you on the news all over the country. And we were like, that's good. So let's see, our first stop was at a friend's house down in, Maryland. And we stopped there. It was a friend, Steve Melcher, and I went to school with Dan Ruskin, and he had passed away just 3 years ago. And his wife and daughter took us in for 2 nights, I guess. So we went down there, we called the affiliate, we went on TV in Maryland, we had a barbecue that night. Dan's mom came over and handed us a check for $200 and said, I just love what you guys are doing and I want to help. So that was good because we only had $700 on the credit card, so now we had $900. And we started driving again. And we went to see Carrie. Carrie lives in Virginia. And as we're driving, a friend of Steve's calls up and says, I just came into a good chunk of money and I love what you're doing. I'm going to the bank and I'm putting $2,000 in your checking account.
Oh my goodness.
Awesome.
All unplanned.
All unplanned, all spontaneous. I actually have to back up a little bit and give Rob Libby lots of credit, because before we left on the trip, Melcher and I were cleaning up the car, and I walk into the back of the car, I put my foot through the floor. Okay, we're screwed. Now it looks like the seats are going to fall out of the car and we'll end up in the middle of the highway. Not good. A friend of Steve's, Rob Libby, steps forward and says, I just bought a plasma welder. Bring the car over, I'll cut out the old stuff, put in some new stuff. It won't be beautiful, but it'll be nice, solid, and strong. We had taken the car and had quotes anywhere from $2,500 to $25,000 to fix the rust on the car. So Rob's work, all in all, was probably close to $5,000. The car spent a month at his house, and he did it because he believed in the project. So now we've got a car with no rust, we've got $2,000, we keep driving. We get to North Carolina, stopped at my aunt's house.
Did you have this mapped out, the way you were going, or?
Basically, we had a map, but we kept changing it based on phone calls that came in and film crews that wanted to interview us. You know, it's like Shreveport, Louisiana. They said, you know, if you need to be here on July 7th.
That's kind of in the wrong direction to go to Oregon.
Yeah, well, it's on the way, because we drove from Connecticut, we went straight down the coast, stopped at my aunt's in North Carolina, and then we drove down to Florida and stayed with Dawn and her family, and then across Florida, and we spent 4 days with Tanya and a bunch of our friends, because I think there was 1, 2, 3, 4, like 7 of us that all went to high school together, that all converged down in Fort Myers for 4 days, and we got to visit and have fun, and we did another interview in Naples while we were there. We actually had the car parked on the roof of the La Mercata Mall, and David Elliott did the interview on the roof of the mall. The car was sitting there. It was very fun, just amazing. So from there, where did we go? We stayed there for a couple of days, then we ended up going to Alabama and spent 4th of July there. So that.
And how long ago was this?
This goes back to the summer of 2010.
Oh, so it's a little less than 2 years ago.
Right, right. Coming up on 2 years.
How long did it take you to go from Connecticut to Oregon, one way?
Oregon was 26 days total. Brookfield to Brookfield, the whole trip was 28 days complete. So we did the numbers. It was 28 states in 28 days in a 72 Mustang, where, I mean, honestly, it broke down 42 times. And every time it broke down, it never stranded us. We had this bonding affection with the car. It broke down the first time just over the Jersey line. We stopped at the Cloisters for lunch, went over the bridge, we got into New Jersey, and it was 103 degrees, and the traffic was stopped, and we're in a 72 Mustang that hasn't been driven in 4 years. And it just died.
Was this with your hydrogen generator?
Yep, with the generator on, with the generator off, didn't matter, the car was just dead. And Melcher puts all the tools out, he gets out there, there's truck drivers and cars going by handing us bottles of water because they're all doing 3 miles an hour, and we're the ones pulled over that they're going around, and you know, are you okay? Takes the tools out, tries everything he can think of, nothing. Nothing he could do could get us off the side of the road.
Now,
And I leaned forward and I stroked the dashboard nicely, and I said, "Blessed Mother, acceleration, help us." And I turned the key and the car started. True story.
like talking to the plants.
It's exactly right. So we talked to the car the entire way. After that one time of pulling over, it never stranded us. It was like talking to a child. The car would say, "I'm not feeling good," and it would rumble, it would slow down, it would backfire, you know, it was just talking to us. And we say, "Okay, okay." And, you know, we would get off the highway and we'd go to the local auto parts store, and Melcher would get under the hood and figure out what's wrong with it. And I'd go in and get the parts. The 72 Mustang, the beautiful thing, parts were never more than like 20 bucks. I think the most expensive thing that we bought on the trip was $69 for a new car cover, because we drove this entire 28 states. Car didn't have a back window. and the car had a hole in the roof. Tanya and I spent a couple of hours one night with duct tape and sewing the duct tape to the roof so that when we drove through the rain, Melcher didn't have to hold his hat in his lap.
Now, who is Melcher? Is he a mechanic or?
He is an electromechanical engineer that I went to high school with, and just an avid car buff. He drives a 67 Firebird. So he's a real car buff and just was an absolute whiz on the trip.
When you were on the trip, by any chance, did you decide to see Jay Leno? He's a car buff. That just came to mind.
We tried, and we put calls into Leno. We put many calls into David Letterman. It's also another good story. Before we left, David Letterman had just started his Facebook group, and so he had all of his different guests would go on, and people would post whether they liked the guest or not. Yeah. And at the time, Dave had just had his birthday, and I think Dave had 11 posts, from people saying happy birthday to David Letterman. I'm thinking he would have gotten more. But we had 122 people, 122 posts saying, put Steve in the WaterCar on the Letterman show.
Oh.
But we never heard from him. It was 10 times more posts than any other thing that they had on their Facebook, but we got no return calls.
He probably may not have even known. It's probably someone's job
I mean,
to
obviously
look at it.
Can't say anything personal about David because I'm sure he doesn't read his email.
Yeah.
A school in Ohio had 3,500 people sign a petition that was sent to CBS News.
Really?
On our behalf, trying to get us on CBS News.
And did you make it on the
Actually,
news?
not to get on CBS News, to get on the Letterman show.
Uh-huh. Oh, so it never came to fruition.
Correct.
And what about Jay Leno? That went nowhere either.
Nothing with Jay Leno, no. But we were on ABC.
I thought of him because of the old cars.
Yeah, no, we were on ABC, we were on NBC, we're on CNN radio a bunch of times. Dave down at Dave Canoli down in Texas treated us very well. We went into the towers in Dallas and we shot about a 45-minute show, and that show had more people viewing it than any other show he'd ever done, and probably by 6 times more people than any had ever viewed the show before. And he was awesome. We actually ended up staying at his house that night. He gave us, $40 in gas money the next day. He took us to a party at I can't remember the name of it, but a restaurant in Dallas. And we showed up in the car, and there were orange cones right outside the front door. And they let us park in front of the cones, and they put a bucket underneath the hood, and they asked all the patrons to come out and put money in it. And so we sat there, and we talked to all the patrons all night. I think we took in $100 from people.